Donald Trump has pledged to implement broad taxes on imported commodities as a way to safeguard our manufacturing and reducing dependency on foreign sources. Trump's inner circles networks showed that the incoming tariffs may be imposed by the administration. Between 45% and 60% of Chinese goods are being used. Significant economic pressure that might significantly impact two-way trade dynamics in a noticeable increase in the persistent US-China conflict over Beijing's strategic and economic domains has enforced comprehensive new restrictions on outbound travel that go beyond its own region, according to a recent Bloomberg story about China's rollout extraordinary actions not only to reduce exporting essential resources directly, like as germanium and gallium to the US states, but also to prohibit foreign businesses based outside of China that supplying us clients with Chinese generated inputs with both military and civilian applications. For these developments are a major advancement in China's initiatives to eliminate US sanctions and export constraints that could change the global lines of production and conformance procedures. But these minerals aren't the China's tightening restrictions only target. Beijing's controls are now also limiting exporting specific dual-use materials and technologies such as some drone models, many of which are commercial drones depend on parts manufactured in China. Specialized high-efficiency batteries, advanced optics sensors that are readily be modified or used for military purposes. Intelligence monitoring or these two-purpose reconnaissance missions drones are essential for more than just consumers. Marketplaces and business uses like as infrastructure and agriculture examination, but also for public safety organizations and military forces that need dependable advanced unmanned aerial vehicle capabilities. By reducing the exporting parts associated with drones, or China injects fully assembled systems. More intricacy and ambiguity into homeland security and U.S. defense procurement. December Security Operations (CH) announced that it would stop shipping in 2024. Of several essential minerals to the including gallium, germanium in the United States. Ultra-hard materials and antimony minerals are necessary for production. Defense, solar modules, and semiconductors apparatus. The Chinese Ministry of according to Commerce, these actions are intended to safeguard interests and national security, as well as fulfill global obligations such as non-proliferation. This declaration was made following the US government's escalation of exports reduced the production of semiconductors. Software and equipment. Expanding the scope of Chinese businesses had an impact on Washington justified these regulations on the basis of national security, claiming their need to prevent China from obtaining technologies that could support its military skill. China's crackdown has increased concerns regarding the stability of worldwide raw material routes in the United States. According to the Geological Survey, China represents about 60% of the world's production of germanium and 98% of the world's supply of gallium, making it a vital source for industries. The ban has increased mineral prices globally. Prices that have higher antimony rates than doubling and exceeding $25,000 for each ton in 2024. Territorial extension of takes initial control of China's new trade laws specifically target parties outside of its own jurisdiction. Foreign companies and middlemen who use Chinese components or materials that ultimately arrive in the United States. This could have legal repercussions for the market. Reflects the territorial dimension of the external, usually connected to the United States, and restrictions on European Union sanctions technologies and commodities. The restricted categories cover a broad range of variety of things essential to Americans. Companies that deal with gallium and germanium essential to semiconductors, defense equipment and communication devices are currently being examined more closely. Chinese officials have proposed extra dual-purpose items, particularly those who might find use in defense, will experience more severe IED controls. Responsibility and implementation of the recent actions by the Chinese Ministry of Commerce declaration emphasized that people or organizations from any nation or area discovered transferring two-uses materials of Chinese origin to the United States that receive them would be subject to legal repercussions under Chinese law. This declaration suggests that Beijing intends to enforce these instructions strictly, preventing parties from acting as different routes to avoid direct bans. But the new regulations do not provide specific enforcement tactics. According to legal analysts, Chinese heralds are more assertive. Oversight of its worldwide production links effects on vital industries. The US has historically relied on Chinese suppliers of vital strategic minerals and cutting-edge materials that support a variety of high-tech areas. That are among the most important of these are the elements germanium and gallium. The same vital to the manufacturing of advanced semiconductors that are sophisticated aerospace communication systems, defense technologies, components, and next China's generation energy solutions. Recent ruling to limit exports of these minerals have caused an urgent issues with U.S. industry policy creators and military strategists regarding the dependability and tenacity of Americans. Gallium from supply chains is frequently transformed into arsenide. Gallium is essential in producing high-frequency, high-speed semiconductors that drive mobile satellite transmitted communication devices, radar systems, receivers, and an expanding array of sophisticated sensors. Special qualities like enabling increased electron mobility and decreased in 5G and 6G signal noise is crucial. High-level telecommunications infrastructure modules for performance computing and advanced optoelectronic devices such as germanium, in contrast to LEDs and laser dots. Historically, fiber optic systems and technologies for infrared imaging is growing even more urgent as the United States increases the size of its high-speed internet networks and create thermal imaging that is sensitive. Arrays for military reconnaissance systems for guiding aircraft and both components of environmental monitoring are also being utilized more frequently in specific solar cells, such as those installed on satellites and without a human vehicles in the air, where their higher resilience and efficiency make them essential. Prior to the Chinese export limitations that we manufacturers frequently face, obtained uranium and gallium by worldwide commodity markets that were in practice that is mostly reliant on Chinese capacity for processing and refining. The U.S. Geological Survey claims that China is the world's largest producer of germany, along with almost all of its high gallium purity, putting it in a close monopolistic status for these materials that were abruptly disconnected from Chinese production could be disrupted by supply schedules and add unpredictability to costs. For example, if domestic defense, there are delays for contractors in obtaining the required wafers of gallium arsenide for sophisticated missile guidance or radar systems, it might delay the implementation of essential defense capabilities. In a similar way, aerospace companies developing innovative communication and satellite technologies networks may find it difficult to sustain development schedules, run the risk of not only monetary losses as well as strategic drawbacks as other countries scramble to update their own facilities. The telecom industry is already facing pressure to increase the reach of broadband and compete in the worldwide competition for cutting-edge wireless standards. Faces the potential for chain of supply. Access to gallium was restricted due to bottlenecks. Based semiconductors that are essential for high-frequency radio frequency components may cause next-generation wireless launch networks. Such limitations can lessen the competitiveness of America in the digital infrastructure that could have an impact everything from broadband in rural areas efforts to further research in furthermore quantum communications defense sector that depends on these minerals for systems that see at night. Advanced guidance for missiles using avionics. Secure satellite technology. Communications could discover rushing to find alternative suppliers or substitute materials, but gallium and germaniums are not as well known. They are rare earth elements, equally essential to contemporary weapons and monitoring instruments. For an extended period of price increases or shortages could compel defense prime contractors to redesign key systems. Makes expensive R&D investments for substitute materials or inventory and recycling of germanium and gallium bearings. Elements that such actions would probably raise the price of procurement and prolong development cycles that eventually have an impact. The technological edge and readiness of the ramifications for the U.S. military are extensive to renewable energy and the larger tech semiconductors, as well as industries producers of data chip centers for electric cars and cutting-edge platforms for computing, are now exposed to new threats of supply interruption. The possible cost hikes that rising has already demonstrated. Other essential minerals, such as antimony costs, may spread across the value chain, raising consumer prices. Upgrades to the data infrastructure for electronics and possibly slowing down the United States switch to a greener, more energy efficient, effective economy. Let's pause briefly. If so far you've liked the video, could we ask for a small favor by clicking like button? Enables us to connect with more people, and offering your opinions or comments in the impact of the comments is even greater. Thank you for viewing, and let's get started. Returning. The reason these materials are crucial is the resources that are targeted are diverse of materials and technologies that are essential to industries in the US, such as gallium and germanium is essential to production. Communications equipment, semiconductors, and defense hardware, which makes them indispensable minerals, are now subject to more stringent regulation. The primary use of gallium is in its creation. Chips made of arsenide are required for high regularity and quick applications including satellites and cell phones. Radar and communication also are the foundation of laser diodes for LEDs. Medical instruction using fiber optics and specific solar panels that improve. Meanwhile, efficiency in germanium is essential for fiber optic cables that allow long-distance, fast data transmission and serves as the foundation for infrared defense-related thermal imaging optics situations in which it appears. Semiconductor gadgets that enhance tighter export for electronic performance. Limitations on these resources will have severe consequences for U.S. companies. Supply chain disruptions are a major concern as American producers find it difficult to source these essential elements, possibly leading to manufacturing decreases and increased production expenses. Innovation may be hampered by such disruptions and reduce our ability to compete in innovative industries such as telecom, defense, and renewable energy. Additionally, technologies are becoming less dependable, and reasonably priced Chinese materials may make us businesses look for alternative suppliers or increase domestic production at a higher cost, thereby increasing operating expenses and inhibiting growth. Outside of gallium and germanium, Chinese officials have suggested that a larger range of dual-use products that are suitable for civilian use and military ends will encounter more difficult limitations that may include high-end computer hardware, including memory modules, performance chips, and specialized equipment that powers consumers' military IT systems and electronics. Tools for artificial intelligence that range from machine learning and algorithms models for associated software are also being examined because of their potential functions of autonomous weapons monitoring and online safety. Moreover, biotechnology medications that can be modified for either biological warfare or medical research and materials used in aerospace, such as advanced, possibly more difficult now, are alloys and composites. To acquire these more comprehensive controls have geopolitical and strategic importance through restricting the export of essential. China's resources and expertise are intended to safeguard its interests in national defense and continue to dominate important industries. Blocking vital technologies from reaching possible rivals enhances China's limiting strategic stance. Access from abroad also strengthens domestic research and development in China's high-tech ecosystems. On the front of diplomacy, limitations are a negotiating tactic, permitting Beijing to use its control over resources to negotiate trade benefits and geopolitical agreements. Enforcement and compliance turn into extra challenges for internationally active U.S. companies. Guaranteeing dual-use things don't accidentally arrive at unauthorized recipients. Make requests for strict compliance guidelines and careful diligence not being followed to these laws runs the risk of fines and penalties or harm to business. Companies may need to invest in reputations, in sophisticated tracking systems and systems for managing sensitive materials, and adhere to the guidelines' strict regulations with an unclear enforcement scope. Whereas China's export control law of 2020 laid the foundation, experts stay unsure of how widely Beijing will utilize its additional territorial powers. Combs claims that the immediate deterring Chinese might be the top priority. Companies from hiding shipments and discouraging nations that act as intermediaries from helping us consumers get around prohibitions. Yet the potential for a more broad enforcement strategy cannot be excluded. Any analogies to U.S. policy? Observers contrast China's recently expanded regulations to the established U.S. territorial authority over delicate technologies. Despite Beijing might not have Washington's vast compliance and enforcement networks, these measures frameworks highlight its most direct endeavor that has not yet been imitated or pushed, resisting outside constraints enforced by the United States and its allies. Impact of the Russia-China alliance on Russia's expanding political and economic collaboration with China could strengthen the position of Beijing in its continuing trade conflict with Washington, despite the fact that the US and China continue to have economic ties. Escalating trade disputes and more stringent U.S. oversight of Chinese technology and capital has prompted Beijing to look for substitute allies and lessen its dependency on U.S. markets. Enhancing relations with Moscow satisfies energy security as one of several strategic goals, and diversification of China's resources. The ability to manufacture depends on stable, closer ties and access to global inputs. Russia's resourcefulness helps risks to Russia's position as a leading exporter of raw materials such as metals and oil. Gas. China's supply chain is anchored by materials. Initiatives such as Siberia Power China's pipeline strengthens its long-term energy assurance as the United States seeks to reduce Chinese influence by limiting essential tech flows. Reliable Russian inputs that support these attempts diminished our influence, while the US limits the growth of China's high-tech industry by restricting exports of semiconductors or examining behemoths such as Huawei. Russia can support China's domestic development capabilities within the Russian technology industry falls short of that of Europe or the US in it has certain advantages in defense, cybersecurity and aerospace, and joint R&D for specialized materials and the exchange of technologies can reduce China's intellectual reliance on us. Washington's property is deteriorating over time, technological bargaining power, alternative commerce and finance mechanisms for our global dominance, money supported by the dollar and authority over payment systems similar to SWIFT grants Washington significant sanctioning authority. China and Russia is interested in reducing these risks or increasing the financial collaboration in resolving bilateral trade and using AL as a substitute for national currencies. Payment methods are investigating digital currencies, enabling them to progressively chip, diminishing the dollar supremacy. Strength of U.S. tariffs and sanctions, geopolitical backing and political. Russia's economic counterweights offers diplomatic coverage to China and strategic weight as the United States mobilizes allies to combat the influence of China. Russia's support in international organizations such as the United Nations Security, Shanghai Cooperation and the Council Organization makes our efforts at Russia's support for isolation helps avoid Beijing's avoidance of geopolitical surrounded, supporting the stability of China and global posture in the face of trade tensions. Growing market options. The SINA, the Russian partnership, promotes infrastructure projects that generate new trade routes and decreased reliance on U.S.-influenced shipping. Journeys such as the Northern Sea Route promise reduced travel durations and reduced prices for exports from China to Europe by constructing railroads and pipelines, and China secures communications links, more reliable, varied channels for movement. This strategic rerouting blunts the goods U.S. tariffs effect since China can bypass Americans and reach new customers. Dominant nodes fight back against sanctions and collective resiliency. If the U.S. escalates Beijing's trade or technology restrictions, able to coordinate reactions with Moscow. Both countries have endured the Western sanctions imposed on Russia since 2014, and more recently, China's combined knowledge allows for more subtle coordinated mitigation techniques, countermeasures and initiatives to maintain the pooling of domestic output. Knowledge and resources are beneficial to both nations. Face external pressures and restricts our ability to be effective initiatives. The start of the trade war. The Sino-American trade conflict began Trump's first term, which marked a significant change in bilateral economic relations. Beginning in 2018, the United States imposed tariffs on numerous billions of dollars worth of Chinese goods, mentioning intellectual force technology for property theft, transfers and ongoing commerce disproportions in the U.S. trade deficit. More than $375 billion in 2017. Policies that shook international markets. In July 2018, supply chains in the United $34 billion were subject to duties from the states. Chinese imports in dollars, including electronic components and machinery, that prompt Beijing will impose taxes on us in retaliation. Crops such as soybeans. By the end of 2019, $550 billion was covered by U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports reaching the end user. China aimed for $185 billion in goods. U.S. exports, increasing operational value expenses and increased prices for consumers caused a decline in trust in the global. China's countermeasures in commerce hit hard. Soybeans in American agriculture, for example. Farmers observed sales to China plummets as Beijing looks to suppliers such as the United States and Brazil gave more than $28 billion in agricultural assistance to mitigate these losses. From 2018 to a 2020 study revealed that American households and companies paid the majority of the tariffs. 2019 New York Federal Reserve Bank, it was estimated to be around $831 per. In the meantime, China's exports to the U.S. declined in several important areas, encouraging Beijing to increase exports markets and increase domestic spending following a two-year surge. Both sides inked the first phase of the conflict. January trade agreement. China promised to purchase an additional $200 in 2020. U.S. goods and services worth billions more than levels in 2017, as well as to discuss IP rights problems as the United States delayed planned increases in tariffs and reduced some current responsibilities, such as the COVID-19 trade was disrupted by the crisis, and by late 2021 China had only fulfilled roughly 60% of its structural problems with commitments, such as there were still industrial subsidies. China's newly unresolved limitations on territorial exports indicate a notable increase in the mutual technology and trade conflicts with Washington by retaining foreign parties responsible for the transfer. Chinese-made goods shipped to the U.S. Beijing adds new uncertainty to the states and intricacy into global value chains, but the long-term consequences still exist. It's unclear if this policy indicates that China is prepared to use its authority to vital components and output abilities that could redraw the closer look at the international commerce map. Russia-China relations strengthen China's ability to handle a lengthy economic impasse by guaranteeing stable resource flows that aim to achieve cooperative diversifying technological initiatives, financial instruments, and obtaining diplomatic. Supporting China lessens its vulnerability to exert pressure on us, while the alliance not address every issue raised by US trade controls IT supplies. Beijing has crucial influence over time. This collaboration could change the complexity of the global economic order. Attempts to utilize trade as a unilateral strategically important weapon and strengthening China's lasting worldwide influence, which concludes this video. We appreciate you viewing this video. Thank you so much for joining us. If our content struck a chord with you today or inspired ideas, kindly take it to show your support, like it and signing up to remain in touch with our community.